Just to go right back though to begin with, was there a lot of music in your house when you were growing up?
Well, for me that's an interesting question because with my parents there probably wasn't that much music, but my mother came from a very large family, and we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and she had 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and all 5 brothers played at least 2 instruments. And actually, my mother, for one time in her life, was a professional dancer. So there was a bit of show business and music in my family. But that sort of, my grandparents' house, sort of, everybody went off to all around the world. Some of my family went to Australia, actually. And so this all happened when I was very young. So maybe it did make an impression on me. It all happened before I was 10 years old, I should think. But there was a pretty impressive bunch. And it was only when someone asked me that question comparatively recently that I realized, yes, there was a lot of music in my family. But not particularly with my parents. They didn't play a lot of music at home. I don't think they played any.
What was the first music to really inspire you, to make you want to go into music yourself?
Oh, I think, when rock and roll hit the headlines, I mean, that was it for me. Elvis Presley was probably one of the first. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, all the greats of rock and roll. I was the same as everybody else. I was just absolutely floored when I heard it. And, of course, I loved it. And eventually managed to talk my father into buying me a guitar. And I suspect I used to do air guitar and all that kind of thing, trying to play the rock greats when I was about 11 or 12 years old.
Did you have any formal vocal training at all?
Not until, again, comparatively recently. I work, most of the time I work with another original zombie, Rod Argent's keyboard player. And one time we were talking about singing coaches. It's probably about 10 years ago. And he mentioned a guy called Ian Adam, who is, sadly he's passed away now, but at the time he was very well known for coaching West End shows. So, Lloyd Webber would probably send the whole cast to Ian Adam, or whatever musicals on at the time in the West End. And so what he's probably looking to do is to strengthen people's voices so that they can sing night after night without damaging their voices. And I did take a series of lessons with him, and what he does is he gives you a cassette of his lesson. And I still try and do it. When I'm working, if we're on tour, I do that lesson twice a day. When we're not working, I probably do it 2 or 3 times a week. But it's made a huge difference. But in the early days, when the band started in the 60s, no, I hadn't had any formal training at all.
You are singing as good as ever, if not better, these days. Are you a subscriber to the theory that the voice gets better with age and experience?
Well, I think that hopefully, so one part of it does. I would hope that with experience, your phrasing, hopefully your pitch and your interpretation can all get better as you get older. But I think you have to work harder at it. It's much more, the strength of your voice and your strength. When you're on the road, it can be quite tough. And all that side of things is easier when you're younger. But hopefully there are parts of your voice that do improve. But I think as you get older, you have to work at it a bit more.
Going back to the beginning of the Zombies, was there an original blueprint for the sound that you wanted for the band, and how did it compare to how it actually turned out?
I'm not sure that there was a blueprint, but what happened at our first ever rehearsal, because some of us didn't know one another very well, it came about because Rod Argent wanted to form a band, and he managed to find a guitarist in his school who he didn't really know. He just saw him playing a guitar one lunchtime and asked him to be in a band. And he got the drummer because they had an army corps at his school, and he was just playing the side drum, and he thought he looked the best. He'd never played a drum kit, a proper drum kit. So he asked him along to rehearsal. Then he had a neighbor who was making a bass guitar in woodwork. He'd never played one. And he asked him to join the band. And I happened to go to school with that neighbor, and I had a a guitar and sang a bit. So it was fairly haphazard how it came together. And originally we were going to be a guitar band, but in the first break we took, rehearsal, Rod went over to a broken down old piano in the corner, a terrible old thing, and he played Nut Rocker by B. Bumble and the Stingers. And I mean, it's quite a sophisticated tune for a young guy to be playing, and I was just floored. And I said to Rod, listen, I know guitar bands are the fad at the moment, but you got to be a keyboard player in the band. And he always says later on he heard me singing, and that's when I became the singer. So it was just by chance. I was originally going to be the rhythm guitarist. So that did give us a different edge, because not many bands had keyboard players. The other thing that we did specialize in, if you like, is that from a very early time we were doing 3-part harmonies that I wasn't aware. Certainly no local bands were doing that, and there weren't many, nationally successful bands until the Beatles came along. But when we first put the band together, it was in about 61, so we still had a couple of years to wait before we heard the Beatles. So the two things that made us a bit different was that we had a keyboard player, and we did 3-part harmony. And we just took that forward to a point where eventually Rod Argent and Chris White started writing their own songs. And then we had, obviously, unique material because they were writing it especially for the band. And I think we did have quite an unusual sound. But it's something that evolved. There wasn't a plan to start with. That's just how the band evolved.
I always thought the band had a more sophisticated sound than a lot of its contemporaries. Would you put a lot of that down to those elements, the keyboard and the 3-part harmonies?
Well, certainly some of it. I mean, also, Rod Argent is an outstanding keyboard player, and he's gone on to get from strength to strength. I mean, he's now he's performed as a classical pianist in that environment with an orchestra. He's a wonderful jazz player, and he's a great rock player. Boogie woogie, can play anything. And we were very fortunate to have him in the band because a lot of the sophistication in the music came from him, and he led everyone in that direction.
Now, you had a major hit on your hands very early in the piece with She's Not There. Do you remember feeling that you did have something special on your hands there with that song, but even before it was released? Could you see the hit potential?
I think we all could, actually. Although we originally recorded 3 songs, we all disagree about how we came to be in Decca Studios in West Hampstead in London one stormy night in 1964, because we'd won a rock competition. And some of us think that as a result of the prize, we got a recording contract, and some think it's just a coincidence. But one way or another, we managed to get this recording contract, and we had a producer called Ken Jones, and he just happened to mention, well, we've got this recording date in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Why don't you try and write something? And Rod went away and wrote She's Not There. And Chris White, our bass player, wrote a really good song called You Make Me Feel Good, which was the B-side. And then we recorded Gershwin's Summertime, which we'd always played from the early days. So we recorded 3 tracks. And when we put them down, I think we thought all 3 of them were really good. And we thought there was a chance any one of them could have been the A-side, to be honest. But once we'd chosen She's Not There, the more we heard it, I think we felt we had a chance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did the song become a difficult act to follow, though? Did its massive success so early in the piece for you make it difficult to follow up with continued success?
I don't think it's particularly the song. It's that, I think everyone should be really grateful for any success that they get. But if you have a choice, or if we'd had a choice, it would have been better for us, I think, for that success to have come in a year down the line.
Yeah.
We decided to have a year as a professional band. We'd all quit university, school, or jobs, whatever we got, and we were going to go out on the road, regardless of whether we made a record or not, or whether we had a hit. And if we'd have had that year, or even 2 years on the road, before we made our first hit, I think it would have been easier for us, because we would have found a bit of a direction. We would have got a bit more of a sophisticated stage act together. As it was, we decide to go out on the road, and sort of 4 or 5 weeks later, we have a huge hit record. And in some ways, I think it came a bit early for us. It's not that it was She's Not There. It's just that Rod and Chris had only just started writing, and we needed to, find a direction and establish ourselves on the road. And instead of doing that and ending up with a hit record, we started with a hit record, and then yes, we did struggle with the charts after that. Although, with the benefit of hindsight, we always had a hit record somewhere. Not usually in the UK. We really struggled here. But around the world, we usually had a hit somewhere. And I think if we'd have been a bit more experienced, we would have realized that we could have perhaps, in a nice way, exploited that a bit more and just gone and played where the hits were. But in those days, sometimes you didn't find out you'd had a hit till a year or 18 months after the record was in the charts.
Mm. Were you very image conscious as a band? Were you aware of presenting a certain image for the band?
No, absolutely not. I think this was, I think we had two weaknesses, possibly more, but one was definitely image. And as I said, some of the guys were just leaving school, and we went to Decca Records and spent the day having our photos taken and talking to the press department, and they tried to make up some kind of story about us, something they could interest the newspapers with. But we were so young, what are they going to say? These guys have just left school, and that's actually how it came out. And to some extent, I think it really affected how we did in the years to come, because that image and those early photos, which were atrocious, they still crop up now, these photos, 40 years on, more than 40 years on. And I think we didn't realize, and I think a lot of people in the music business didn't realize, really how important image is. Of course, it helps if you can make good records and if you can play good live and everything. But image is a very important part of selling a band. And I thought our image was absolutely atrocious. And I'm not alone. The whole band feels that,
Sure. Now, you're recognised as being part of that whole British invasion thing. Did you have much contact with the other bands of that British invasion? And did you consider them competition at all?
Well, we had contact with some of them, but as a band, we worked all the time. So it was more a matter of who we worked with rather than socialising with bands. Especially the Searchers, we worked a lot with them because they had the same manager as us. Other British bands, it's just a matter of when we played with them. I mean, we played with The Who a few times. Never played on the same bill as the Beatles or the Stones. But, we met most of the bands one way or another. Often what it would be, you'd spend a day in some studio doing miming a bit of film for your latest single, and they would have 10 other bands there, and these films would be sent out around the world, quite possibly to Australia, and that's the kind of time when you would hook up with other bands.
Mm. When you started recording solo material in the 70s, how sure were you about the direction that you wanted to go musically?
Well, I think that especially in the early days, and maybe even there's an element of truth in this right up to now, that whether I've been in a band or whether it's a solo thing, we tend to just get the 10 or 12 best songs we've got and record them the best we can. I don't think I was really aware of trying to move in any particular musical direction when I was recording my solo stuff. But I was really lucky because and certainly the first two albums, and to some extent the third album, I had Rod Argent and Chris White from the Zombies, who had both written million-selling songs. Rod had written two. And also Russ Ballard, who within Argent was writing songs for me, and he'd written million-selling songs as well. So I got three top-line writers writing for me, and at the time, they were just mates, and you don't think about it till afterwards, and you think, you were really lucky to have these guys writing for you. And so a lot of the direction was governed by the writers, what they came up with. Some of the songs, because they were all involved in Argent, so some of the more rocky songs went to Argent, and the more melodic and perhaps romantic tunes came to me. And also I was trying to establish myself as a writer, and I wrote, I think, 4 or 5 songs on the first album, and then I think I wrote 6 or 7 on the second album, and so that began to govern the musical direction that the albums took.
Now, is that true that you also released some singles under a pseudonym of Neil MacArthur?
I did, actually.
Yeah.
When the Zombies finished, I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in the music business. It had got a bit tough at the end, and I was still only probably about 21 or maybe 22, and I wasn't absolutely sure if the music business was right for me. We'd met quite a few crooks while we'd been out on the road, same as everybody else. And you start to question, is this business for me? And I took a year out of the business, and people often ask me what I did. I phoned a job agency and just said, have you got any jobs? And I just took the first job they offered me. So I worked in an office for a year. But towards the end of the year, we started to have big success in America again, the Zombies. And lots of producers started to approach me to see if I was interested in recording. And one was called Mike Hurst, and he had made some great records, the early hits with Cat Stevens, like Matthew and Son, Gonna Get Me a Gun, I Love My Dog. Really, at the time, they were just classic hit records. And I loved them, and I thought, well, I'd like to work with this guy. So what we arranged to do, I just went into the studio in the evenings after work and put some tracks down. And Mike Hurst came up with the idea of re-recording She's Not There. As I wasn't sure I was going to continue in the music business, I didn't really question it that much. I was just having some fun and seeing if the studio was still a place I wanted to be. He also suggested I change my name to Neil MacArthur, and we didn't really discuss it that much. Again, I just went along with it, not knowing, or certainly not thinking that I would be back in the music business full time. For me, it was just a fun thing. But She's Not There by Neil MacArthur was released, and I couldn't believe it. It went into the charts. And I was then faced with the prospect of being Neil MacArthur, and for a year, a lot of people thought that was my name, which is quite bizarre, really. But at the end of that year, I was coming home from a party with Chris White, the original bass player in the Zombies, in his car, and he said to me, look, why don't you forget this Neil MacArthur thing and you start recording as a solo artist, and Rod Argent and myself would love to produce you. And I thought that sounded like a really good idea to get the old team back together. Mm-hmm. And that's how I started recording albums as a solo artist.
Just stepping forward a few years, and your work with the Alan Parsons project, how did that come about, and how do you look back on that time now?
Well, I worked with them. I usually only sang one song per album, but I think I'm on 6 or 7 of their albums. And so it was over a period of many years. I met Alan, first of all, when the Zombies recorded their last album, Odyssey Oracle, in Abbey Road. And Alan was an engineer in those days at Abbey Road. And I met him there. But also we were sort of neighbours. We both lived in the same area of London, and we used to drink in a pub called The Flask in Hampstead Village on a Saturday morning, and Saturday lunchtime, and so I would see him in there. And when he started doing the Alan Parsons project, I guess it was quite a natural thing for him to approach me to sing some of the tracks, and I was very happy to do it. I'm a great admirer of Alan's work, and I thought that the Alan Parsons projects were fantastic. I was very pleased to be involved in them.
Now, away from music, I believe you've done a little bit of acting in your time as well. Is that right?
I'm not too sure about that. The Zombies were in a film called Bunny Lake is Missing, but really we just, we had to write some songs for it, and then they filmed us playing those songs. Although we did sort of, I think actually it's just my face is on a TV in a pub, and Laurence Olivier is in that pub with Carol Lindley, so you could say that I shared the screen with Sir Laurence Olivier, if you like. Sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it?
Oh, that's a great claim
to fame. But it's only
fame.
for a few seconds, and then he's in this pub and he stands up, takes one look at my face on the TV screen and turns it off. So I'm not sure that he particularly approved of what we were doing.
Now, you've been working with Rod again in recent years. What was the initial impetus in getting you two back together?
Well, I decided to go back on the road. There's a great keyboard player called Don Airey, who's currently playing with Deep Purple, but he's played with Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, Whitesnake, lots of big rock bands. And he was always calling me and saying, you really should get back on the road. And I thought, I would never go back on the road. I thought there'd been too big a gap. I hadn't played for 23 years on the road. I'd been recording and writing and doing all sorts of other things, but not actually playing live. And he eventually talked me into it. He put a great band together, and I went out on the road. But after about 2 years, a lot of the guys had drifted off into other projects, including Don Airey, and I called Rod and said, do you fancy getting back on the road? And it had been 20-something years for him, too. And originally we agreed that he would just try 6 or 7 dates, because he wasn't convinced he wanted to do it. But, after about 10 minutes on the first night, it felt as though we played the week before, instead of which there'd been a 20-something year gap. And we never looked back. I think that was about 8 years ago. And shortly after that, we got into a studio and just to see if, what would it be like to record again. And again, it just felt very natural. And we've done 2 studio albums and a double live album, and there's a DVD of that double live album as well. So we've recorded quite a lot of new material together, and it just feels very natural playing with him.
So it's a project that's just continues to grow.
It is a project that continues to grow, absolutely. Everywhere we're playing to bigger and bigger places. I mean, we've been to America many times, and we're playing quite big venues now. And in the UK, we're playing bigger and bigger venues. We have actually been asked to come to Australia to play, and I'd love to. But so far, it hasn't. Just the mechanics of it all hasn't been put together. But I'd love to get over there. We went to the Philippines, which the Zombies were very, very successful in the Philippines, and probably more successful there than anywhere else. And so it was great to go back there a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed it. But on top of that, we've played America, Canada, all through Europe, and it's wonderful to get this chance at, probably in the autumn of our careers to get out there and play again and to travel around the world. Neither of us expected to be doing this.
And I guess
in some ways it's come about by chance, and I think it's brilliant, absolutely fantastic for us.
And I guess this time too, without the pressure hanging over you of wondering where the next hit's going to come from.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it is nice to not have to worry about that, and also it's nice to realise that if you play well and you're consistent in how you perform, you can build a fan base and gradually get into slightly bigger and bigger places. We'll probably, who knows in this world, but the chances are we'll never play really big places, and we'll probably never have another hit record. But we love playing, we love writing, so that's enough. I mean, I'm not even sure if I want all that pressure and problems of hit records and arena concerts. I'm quite happy to be doing what we're doing.
Working with Rod again after all these years, have you noticed any changes in him, in his approach to his music, or just as a working colleague?
I think he's always been very serious about his music, and he's very determined. He's got a lot of stamina. He knows what he wants, and he'll work till he gets it. He's and I admire him for that, and it really helps me, because I know that when we get together to work, it's serious. I think sometimes I can be a bit more light-hearted about music and can sort of lose my way a bit. So it works very well. I think that it's a good combination. But he is a serious guy, and as far as his music's concerned, and he's a pretty sophisticated musician as well, which can inspire all the other people who are in the studio with him.
Now, I believe you've got a very special concert event coming up in the new year, celebrating the anniversary of Odyssey and Oracle.
We have, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're playing the 7th, 8th and 9th of March, but the dates are on my website. If you just go to Google, you'll eventually get there. At the Shepherd's Bush Empire in London, and originally we were just going to do 2 nights, but it's sold out, so we've put a 3rd night in, so it would appear there is a lot of interest in these concerts. And basically, we're putting the original members of the Zombies together, and sadly our lead guitarist passed away, but the other guys are all going to be playing for the first time since 1967, which is going to be very interesting.
Wow.
And we're going to play Odyssey and Oracle in its entirety, which we've never done, and to my knowledge, no one else has ever done it. I think it's going to be a very interesting evening.
It must be an amazing feeling, because I guess the first time around you wouldn't have got the opportunity to play a lot of those songs live.
No, I think we played a couple of them. We did certainly, literally just played a couple. We didn't play all the songs, and we've never played it from beginning to end. So we're in the strange situation of having to relearn songs that we recorded. I mean, some of them I haven't sung since 1967. Probably never knew the words to them. I was probably reading them off a scrap of paper in the studio, and so I've had to sit down and learn the words, and the guys have had to learn the chords, and we've had a few rehearsals, and it's going well. And I'm actually getting together with them tomorrow to see what stage we're at. We've got a couple more months, so I'm sure we'll be fine. When it'll be all right on the night.
Fantastic. That is wonderful. And how would you like to see the Zombies remembered when it's all said and done?
Well, I mean, in the first place, it would be very nice just to be remembered, I think. When we first started the band, I think we probably all thought that we'd be lucky if we had a year on the road, and that would be it. And we would probably be, shortly after, we would be forgotten. So the thought that we're going to be remembered at all is an exciting thought, but I think it would be nice to be remembered as people who really did try and do their best. And, we had 2 wonderful writers in the band, which I think made us a little bit different from many of the other bands. So, if we could be remembered as a band that wrote and recorded really good songs and always tried to do their best, I think that wouldn't be too bad.
And apart from the Odyssey and Oracle concert coming up in March, what else is on your books for the new year?
Well, after we've done that, we're actually going to record that and film it. So that will take up a little time after those concerts to just get those projects sorted. Then we're going to tour, starting on May the 14th. We're doing about 30 dates with the Yardbirds, and we'll be playing all the major concert halls in the UK, which would be a first time for us, really, and we're headlining to be playing the major concert halls in the UK, and that takes us through to the middle of the summer when we'll be going to the States, but those dates haven't been confirmed yet, but I know we're going, which will take us through to the autumn. It's quite interesting to know that we know exactly what we'll be doing till pretty much this time next year, which is certainly a change from how things were a few years ago. It's a nice feeling, really. Yeah,
an exciting new chapter.
I know, and to be doing this at this time in our lives, and neither of us had not a thought of getting out on the road again. I mean, it's really quite bizarre, but it's really exciting.
Colin, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure catching up with you. Congratulations on a wonderful career so far, and I'm sure many more wonderful years to come.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed having a chat. All the very best.
Thank you, and I hope we do get to see you guys down here in the not-too-distant future.
Well,
that would be great.
I'd love to come down.
We'll look forward to that. Thanks again, Colin.
Okay, mate.
Okay, bye.
Bye.